Hi, Chase. I wanted to leave you some feedback on your thesis statement and your outline. So, as a whole, I think things are working, right? I can see a claim emerging. I can see a stance emerging. It's clear that you align yourself with Orwell's position in this essay, and I think that these moments in the text right here could definitely make for good key ideas um, in the essay. So as a whole, I think it's working. There are some areas here and there that I want you to focus on for revision. So one thing that really feels like is missing in your summary is the plot details that are really needed for the reader to be able to understand the what happens in the essay. So, in order for the reader to understand how, or in order for the reader to get to Orwell's stance and then your stance, we kind of need those summary details to understand what's happening in the essay. So, who the narrator is, where the story takes place, and what the basic plot is. So I would go back to some of these sentences that are a little broad in their ideas, and instead think about very concretely and clearly capturing those main plot points that a reader will need in order to understand uh, how you've arrived at your conclusion in the claim, right? Does that make sense? So we really need to know where the story takes place and essentially what happens. You know, you don't have to give every single tiny little detail, right? You're going to get more in depth into the what happens in the essay, but I don't think you ever, explicitly say. You're kind of dancing around the idea that the narrator is a prison guard working in a prison whose main function is to execute prisoners, and on this specific day he sees the prisoner do something which forever changes his outlook on capital punishment, right? So that all that is kind of missing in these sentences that you have here in the introduction. So I think it's a good idea for you to go back and make these more clear and concrete. um, so it feels like this is your thesis. Capital murder is not the solution to the most wrongful crime, because there is always a better solution than taking away a perfectly healthy life. So remember, this is something that we talked about in class this week. So here's one of the things that you want to be careful about. In a critical analysis, your main purpose is to examine the effectiveness or the persuasiveness of the author's argument, not necessarily argue for or against the topic. So what I mean by this is your thesis statement is set up to debate capital punishment. And while that can be implied throughout the paper, your main purpose is to argue whether or not Orwell's argument is persuasive, and you do that based on the strategies that he uses to suggest the argument to the audience. So I recommend, instead, because this really sets you up not to talk about Orwell and his strategies in his essay, but instead to have a conversation about capital punishment. And that's not what you want to do in this essay. So I recommend going back to the announcement where I post some questions for you that you could potentially use as thesis statements. Go back to the lecture and take a look at some of those suggestions there. So I think that you have the right idea, right? Because what's kind of implied in there is that Orwell's argument is persuasive, but that really should be what the focus is for the claim. Okay, so as a whole, I think all the ideas are working. It's just kind of clarifying some things for the reader, and also for the genre, right? Which is critical analysis. All right, I look forward to seeing where you take this.